So Kamala finally did a national solo TV interview. And unlike P. Diddy, she didn't need any baby oil to slide through this one. Before the interview, MSNBC's Stephanie Ruhle revealed her unique qualifications for the job on Bill Maher's show.
Greg Gutfeld, known for his no-holds-barred commentary, recently pointed out what many Americans have been thinking.
Yeah, I play Would You Rather every time I put on MSNBC. Would I rather watch that or start a juice cleanse before making love to Andrea Mitchell? But voting for Kamala seems a lot more like a different game, like Sorry or Risk. Meanwhile, Biden was more of a boggle, Trivial Pursuit, with time left over for operation.
Kamala Harris's newfound attention to the border crisis seems to be less about solving a problem and more about boosting her political image.
So that's all Ruhle needs to know. Kamala isn't Trump. And Steph's really passionate about Kamala avoiding the press, unless, of course, the press is her. There she is. But first things first. Why is Ruhle wearing the latest from the Wednesday Addams collection? Maybe she knew Kamala was going to speak less than Lurch. And where did they tape this? The back room of a Home Depot? I think they were both sitting on floor model toilets. Anyway, on to the substance of the interview. There wasn't any. There was more fluffing here than in your average porno.
Gutfeld didn't mince words in his takedown of Harris's abrupt shift in tone, framing it as yet another example of a politician following the polls instead of principles. It's hard to ignore the timing of her decision. After all, Harris has had ample opportunity to address the border situation over the last 4 years.
If Ruhle were any more of a plant, she'd require watering. But at least I didn't hear the word holistic 3 times in 15 seconds. And here I thought Joe was the stutterer. She says holistically like she just learned the word holistically. It was like I was in Spanish class when I finally learned the phrase el sexo anal. Kamala also talked as if she hasn't been the VP for the past 4 years. Instead, she sounded like a temp on her first day at a new job. She says she wants to create an opportunity economy. But like Joe, after a pint of strained peas and 3 Ensures, she left a big mess.
As vice president, she was even designated as the border czar, charged with handling immigration policy and ensuring the security of the nation's southern frontier. And yet, despite holding this title, Harris remained notably absent from the border crisis for years.
She's going to create an economy? She can't even create a sentence. Greedy grocers aren't the reason families need a cosigner to buy eggs, lady. You think someone who smoked as much weed as she claims would keep the price of snacks down? Of course, she wants those evil corporations to pay their fair share. Fair share doesn't mean anything. It's like saying I love you. For the phrase fair share is terminally subjective. And like a book from Brian Kilmeade, no smart person buys it. Especially any adult who's been around kids where saying, that's not fair, is applied to everything. Including when I wouldn't pay the Boy Scouts I hired to wax my back because the experience should be payment enough.
The issue grew, the situation worsened, and still there was no visit, no urgent speech, no grand policy initiative to tackle what many viewed as a growing emergency. So why now? Gutfeld argued that the answer is simple: politics. Polls have consistently shown that immigration and border security are among the top concerns for American voters.
Letting a Democrat decide what a fair tax rate is like letting a junkie decide how much meth he should get for $50. So that's all we got. But how did Ruhle think it went? Does she think one could watch and say Kamala didn't give a clear and direct answer? But that's okay, because we're not talking about clear and direct issues. Okay, flying nun. Her and Kamala should have a stupid off. The issues aren't clear or direct. Inflation, crime, the border, what's unclear there? I'm going to use that excuse the next time a cop asks me how fast I was going. Just kidding, I have a driver. Deucey's not bad. But Steph got exactly what she said she wanted, no straight answers. And for the rest of us, not so much. At least now we know why Kamala has been avoiding the press. I've never seen someone so anxious and irritable while trying to express hope and joy. She probably woke up with a headache. I don't know if she's a wine drunk, but her policies are those of a wine drunk. Vague platitudes that could only fool other drunks, matching her drink for drink. Until the morning when the harsh sun of reality peeks through the blinds. No wonder consumer confidence fell in September after notching a 6-month high. Because perhaps the public not only sees Harris as the Democrat nominee, but also the one being pushed by the legacy media, the deep state, Hollywood, all the usual suspects. Once again, we're in an unfair fight just because we're winning. You filthy people. I know what you're thinking. Happy Wednesday, everyone. So Joe Biden appeared on The View today, where co-host Sarah Haynes said it's like having one of the Beatles at the table. True, if you're talking about George or John.
As the 2024 elections draw closer, Harris, along with other Democrats, faces increasing pressure to show that they are doing something, anything, to address these concerns. Her sudden decision to visit the border isn't a response to a new crisis or a revelation about the severity of the situation. It's a reaction to political reality. If she doesn't act now, she risks losing the support of an electorate that is growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of action on the issue.
Kamala Harris will visit the southern border on Friday. She said she's looking forward to finally meeting Justin Trudeau. Speaking of Harris, at the last debate, she said she was a middle-class kid. However, it appears Harris enjoyed things most middle-class kids didn't, like living abroad, private school, growing up in some of the wealthiest places on earth. The only thing she didn't enjoy was a nanny. Unlike her husband. You're welcome, America. New CDC data shows that U.S. obesity rates have fallen for the first time ever. But just like the crime statistics, the CDC left out the cities of New Orleans, Los Angeles, and The View. Reports claim that a U.S. woman died inside Switzerland's new suicide pod. Where can you buy one for a friend? Asked one woman. They say.
We're not messing around today.
A survey finds residents of Wyoming have the most positive outlook on life. Researchers could only find 3 residents with a negative attitude about the future. Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, and a snow-covered buffalo.
But Harris's pivot on immigration isn't just a matter of timing. It's also a matter of credibility, or lack thereof. Gutfeld was quick to remind his audience that this is the same Kamala Harris who for years downplayed the border crisis. She dismissed concerns about illegal immigration as overblown and brushed off the idea that there was anything particularly unusual happening at the border.
Finally, CNN aired a McDonald's segment featuring some of their food, but the food was not so much a prop as it was to keep Stelter from trying to eat Caitlin Collins. He's a hungry little devil. All right, let's do a monologue. So after 4 years as border czar and serving in our nation's second highest office, Kamala seems to have suddenly remembered that we actually have a border. She's seen the light, and it's not the one Joe's walking towards. True, after 4 years of denying there's a border crisis, what's changed? Why the 180? Do you suppose it's the polls? It's amazing how the only way to get a Democrat to do anything is their fear of losing power. Then suddenly everything they mocked becomes everything they embrace. According to a new Gallup poll, the orange meanie, he's winning. And the reasons why happen to be real, issues. Things like economic pessimism, inflation, fuel prices higher than Pelosi's eyebrows.
For years, she was content to let the issue fester, confident that it would remain a low priority for voters. Now, however, the winds have shifted. The border crisis is no longer an issue that can be ignored.
And there's that, little border thing, that crazy notion that every nation in history has been allowed to have a border except the U.S. It's no wonder a New York Times poll shows that in swing states like Arizona, Georgia, and even North Carolina, Trump is spanking Kamala like a mouthy orphan. And in light of how underpolled Republicans are, the margins are likely wider than a Jerry Nadler seatbelt extender. So Kamala, suddenly she's for fracking. Suddenly she hates defunding the police. And yes, suddenly she's heading to the border. Now, if you doubt that this is a major change from the past, here she is providing a nuanced articulation of her previous border policy.
And so Harris, ever the political chameleon, has shifted with it. Suddenly, The same politician who once scoffed at the idea of a border crisis is now taking it seriously, or at least pretending to.
I mean, he does that all the time. After dinner, he'll go into a kitchen and say hello to everybody in the kitchen, and they're all stunned. And he's taking pictures and, giving them. He does a lot of things that people don't realize he does. And he is a showman, there's no question. But there is also another side of him that a lot of people haven't seen. But what I loved about today was I loved listening to Donald Trump talk about how he was going to improve the economy and what he was going to do to make sure that he brought jobs back to the United States. He talked about reducing corporate taxes on companies from 21% to 15% if they make their goods in the United States.
Judge Jeanine's commentary on Donald Trump's recent campaign trail performance was nothing short of intense and at times even alarming. Her tone, filled with passion and indignation, was designed to evoke a visceral response from the audience, especially when she focused on Kamala Harris. As she spoke, it was clear that Judge Jeanine was deeply frustrated with Harris, particularly regarding her handling of the economy.
Dana, the truth is that in any job across this country, if you don't come up to the basic requirements of what the job requires you to do, you're going to lose your job. There's no second chances. You don't get, I'm tired of lessons learned. I've said it a million times. You read this report and it's everything that Blumenthal said it was. It's outrageous. It's shocking. Okay, so I'm invited to The View to talk about my new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. And, the publisher said, you want to go to The View? I said, of course I'll go to The View. I like Whoopi. I like them. I have no problem talking about my book. So I go there.
In her eyes, Harris embodies everything wrong with the current state of America's financial stability. She accuses Harris of incompetence and indifference, stating that Harris doesn't care about the average American and that she's incapable of solving the economic crisis. What made her critique feel even more dramatic was her comparison of Harris to Trump.
He's consistent with his theme of, making America wealthy, safe, strong, and great again. He talked about research and development tax credits on U.S.-based manufacturing. And then he talked about special zones, federal land with low regulation, where they were going to incentivize companies to come in and make American products. And then he actually talked about a global ambassador. And, the first segment was relatively calm. And, I got the transcript, and one of the things I said was, one of the things we need now, we need people to talk to people who ostensibly hate each other. It's time we sat down and had a conversation. And Whoopi, interrupted and said, now? Oh, I'm so glad. But anyway, that was almost prescient. The second segment, after some small talk, we had, I was making small talk. I was, happy to discuss my book. Right? And then we came back, and it was, no holds barred.
While Harris was described as someone who only cared about securing votes, Trump was portrayed as a true champion of the people. Judge Jeanine highlighted Trump's interaction with everyday Americans, like his visit to a store in Pennsylvania where he gave $100 to a struggling mother. This act of kindness was meant to showcase his genuine concern for the people, contrasting sharply with the image of Harris she painted.
We've got the Secret Service knew there was a guy with a rangefinder 30 minutes before. They were notified about an individual on the roof 2 minutes before, but never communicated it to the people on the stage. And the guy with the drone is on the 800 toll-free line with the manufacturer. And, there's something to be said, Greg, for, you want the rank and file. But I also think that whether DEI is responsible for that, you get cops who apply for jobs and get jobs with police departments all over this country. They go through basic training. And once they're on the job and they can't do the job, they're gone. To go out to the world and say, bring those jobs back to the United States. Bring it all back here. Let's do it in America. And I loved when he said 100% tariff on cars made in Mexico. If you want someone who is going to do what a Democrat president has not been able to do, and that is improve the economy, it was only when Trump was in office that we had the consumer confidence and the animal instincts that go with the consumer confidence. Kamala Harris can't even answer whether we're better off now than we were 4 years ago. And all this nonsense of, oh, I'm going to do price fixing. Like, you know what? You know why that infuriates me?
Throughout her commentary, Judge Jeanine hammered home the idea that Trump has a clear and actionable plan to save the economy, while Harris is incapable of providing any meaningful solutions. Her vivid descriptions of Trump's proposals, cutting taxes, creating special zones for U.S.-based manufacturing, and imposing tariffs on foreign-made goods, served to reinforce the idea that Trump is the only one capable of turning the economy around.
Whoopi got angry, and what the viewing audience, the television audience, didn't see is that they popped up the cover of my book as she pushed off the desk, unplugged her mic, and then stormed off the set. So I'm there saying, I'm in television. I said, I don't think the segment's over, but I think she just left, Jeanine. I think it's over. So I take off my own mic, and then you have to go down the stairs. I go down the stairs, and she's right there. And, so I see a difference between management and the rank and file. The management is so politicized that apparently Cheadle worked for Jill Biden before she was made the head of Secret Service. And this guy, Rowe, who's now the acting director, apparently was a Democrat staffer who worked for Pat Leahy and then worked in the Obama administration, but he was a Democrat operative.
Perhaps the most chilling part of Judge Jeanine's tirade was her accusation that Harris is indifferent to the plight of the American people. She claimed that if Harris truly cared about the struggles of everyday Americans, she would take immediate action to address price gouging by big corporations.
Yeah. I mean, and it's time we took it seriously. You've got an ex-president who was almost killed twice. I mean, that is shocking and that is embarrassing. And I guess in the end, what we have to recognize is that if we do allow someone in this country who hates this country, like the president of Iran, and we provide him Secret Service protection, and we can't provide the fundamental Secret Service protection to the president of the United States, we got a problem. I said it before, and I say it now with an exclamation at the end. Some things are so negligent, so reckless that they border on the intentional. I said something like, Whoopi, I spent my whole life fighting for victims because we had talked about rapes and all that. And she said to me, as she got up in my face, and I read somewhere someone said, well, you should have kept walking. I couldn't walk by her. She was at the bottom of the stairs. She says, F you, F you. And then I said, did you just say F you? And then she said, get the F out of this building, get the F out of this building. So I'm there and I'm like, okay.
And you didn't do anything to provoke anybody there?
No, you can ask the people that I was with. I mean, she was nuts going off the set. And then when I walked down, and so as I started walking out the building, so this woman is yelling behind me, get the F out of this building. I mean, look, I've been a prosecutor, judge, DA for 30 years. I try murder cases. I can go toe to toe with anybody. But that was abuse. And it was sad. It was a sad moment.
Her statement that Harris doesn't care was delivered with such conviction that it created a stark divide between Trump's empathy and Harris's supposed lack of concern. Her closing remarks, in which she challenges Harris to take action now if she truly cares about the American people, were particularly powerful.
If she's concerned about the American person like Donald Trump is at the bodega or with the construction workers at 6 a.m. before the trial or wherever he went in Chick-fil-A, if she were concerned, she would start working on it right now. If the big corporations, Kamala, are making it impossible for Americans to pay for food that they have to pay with credit cards and they're living paycheck to paycheck, then why don't you put it into effect right now? Why don't you do something and prosecute them? because she doesn't care. She only cares if you vote for her, and she'll never do it if you do.
She essentially dared Harris to prove her wrong by taking immediate steps to alleviate the economic hardships that so many Americans are facing. But her tone made it clear that she didn't expect Harris to rise to the challenge. Overall, Judge Jeanine's comments were a stark reminder of the high stakes of the upcoming election. Her depiction of Harris as grossly incompetent and unconcerned about the people, contrasted with Trump's image as a savior of the economy, paints a picture of a deeply divided America.
We turn our attention to another interview on another network. I didn't think there were other networks. Anyway, Kamala Harris sat down for her first and only solo national interview. How brave of the campaign.
Sean Hannity, a prominent conservative political commentator and host of Hannity on Fox News, has carved a significant niche for himself in the landscape of American media. Known for his unapologetically partisan views, he often scrutinizes the actions and statements of political figures, particularly those associated with the Democratic Party.
With, of course, one of her top supporters at MSDNC, Stephanie Ruhle. Now, she's a big supporter of Kamala Harris. She is rooting for Kamala to win. That's fine in my book. She's a radical left-wing talk show host. Needless to say, this was not a hard-hitting interview with a nonpartisan reporter. By the way, that's okay. I interviewed Donald Trump. I definitely want Donald Trump to win. I'm not shy about it. I say it all the time. We are both members of the press. She fancies herself a journalist. She's not. She's a talk show host like me. I'm honest about who I am. Donald Trump doesn't just talk to yours truly. He answers questions. He does press avails on virtually every outlet on a regular basis. So does J.D. Vance. Even he does it with networks that hate him, which is most of the media mob. So for tonight's appearance on MSDNC, to be Kamala's only solo national television interview, after the 16 minutes and 29 seconds with Tim Walz on fake news CNN, it's troubling, especially when she can't even answer a single question without contradicting herself. For example, here she is vowing to fix the economy. Last year, she was saying, we call it Bidenomics, and we're so proud of it.
His style blends opinion-driven commentary with discussions that engage with current events, providing a platform where he can express his support for candidates and policies aligned with his values. Hannity's career began in local radio and eventually transitioned to television, where he gained prominence for his strong conservative stance.
The giggling vice president, proud of Bidenomics, until finally now the realities set in that, I'm not so proud. Also, she talked about fixing the border, but during the very height of the border crisis, your border czar kept telling you the border's secure when it never was, and everybody knew it. Never mind, she wants free housing, health care, food, education, amnesty, and, sex change operations for illegal immigrants to reward them for their illegal behavior. Is Kamala ever going to explain blatant lies? Is she ever going to be asked by the media? I doubt it. And look at your screen. Will she ever be asked about her radical stated positions in her own words? Because tonight there was no mention of her support for getting rid of the filibuster to pass the $93 trillion Green New Deal, or government health care for all, and banning private health insurance, or banning fracking and offshore drilling, or decriminalizing illegal immigration, and offering all these free everything for illegals. And on top of that, then we have Kamala Harris, even those that are in jail would get sex change operations. It is bizarre. And even during tonight's softball questions, Kamala struggled again. This was supposed to be an easy interview with a friendly MSDNC liberal leftist talk show host that was going to bat for her over the weekend.
He is known for his unwavering support of former President Donald Trump, frequently advocating for Trump's policies and critiquing opponents with a fervor that resonates with his audience. This dedication to Trump has defined much of Hannity's brand, positioning him as a leading voice within conservative media.
It's not nirvana to expect somebody who wants to be president to answer questions about what she says she wants to do. Now, she had a hard time answering questions from a loyal supporter at, socialist MSDNC who wants to give her a free pass on everything. How is she going to confront Putin or Xi or the mullahs in Iran as president? And by the way, we reported last night, the Islamic Republic of Iran, they are now actively trying to murder Donald Trump. This should come as no surprise. In 2022, they released a cheap, poorly produced animated video fantasizing about assassinating Donald Trump on a golf course near Mar-a-Lago as a revenge for killing their favorite terrorist, and that would be General Soleimani. And now coordinated efforts from Iran to assassinate Donald Trump are intensifying as the election nears. My sources say it is beyond the pale. It's never been this loud. It's never been this dangerous. But at the same time, the Iranian president is in our country, allowed in this country, to spew anti-American rhetoric, anti-Semitic rhetoric at the United Nations. Here's how Donald Trump responded.
One of Hannity's hallmarks is his ability to engage his audience through direct commentary on political events. He does not shy away from discussing controversial topics, often framing them in a way that emphasizes the failures of democratic leadership. His commentary is characterized by a sense of urgency, which serves to mobilize his audience around issues he considers critical.
The Iranians fear Trump. They're not going to hear a response like that from Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. They are unable to muster the courage to openly defend Donald Trump and his supporters from threats from a foreign nation, a radical Islamic terrorist-supporting nation, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. They continuously spout their own toxic rhetoric against Donald Trump. Iran now trying to interfere in this election, murdered Donald Trump. They already hacked his campaign emails. Nobody in the press seems to give a damn. And the left's dangerous rhetoric just continues. And this includes Biden's idiotic Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, who just called on MSDNC for Donald Trump to be extinguished for good.
In recent discussions, Hannity has expressed his opinions on various political figures and their media appearances, particularly focusing on how those appearances can influence public perception. He often critiques interviews and debates, emphasizing the need for political figures to engage with challenging questions from journalists.
Donald Trump has just survived not one but 2 assassination attempts, all while Iran is trying to finish the job. And they still didn't sweep the area around Trump International. And a member of Biden's cabinet is calling for Trump to be extinguished for good. Frankly, beyond irresponsible. And by the way, Secret Service, maybe bring her in and ask her what the hell she meant by that. And it's not just Raimondo. On that hard-hitting news show, The View, Joe Biden himself continued to dehumanize Donald Trump, even pretended to squish him like a bug. Lighted 2 assassination attempts, maybe not the smartest move. According to Democrats, the mob, the media, state-run media, Trump is an existential threat to our survival. They say it all the time. They compare him to Hitler. They vilify him around every turn. Some even, after Trump was almost murdered. Reckless, irresponsible, and consistent. That's it. This is the new radical, extreme, Marxist, leftist party that wants to get in power. This isn't new. The left in this country has openly been fantasizing about Donald Trump's demise for years, and nobody's been held accountable.
Hannity believes that transparency and accountability are paramount, and he regularly calls out media outlets that he perceives as biased or uncritical toward Democratic candidates.
Eliminated, put a bullet in Trump, blow up the White House. When's the last time an actor murdered a president? I will take him out tonight. If you're a Trump hater or a Democrat, the media mob, you'll get a pass. Your violent rhetoric, you can joke about killing a president. You can even glorify violent crime and rioting. In fact, the current Democratic nominee for president, Kamala Harris, she has done both.
The impact of Hannity's commentary is multifaceted. On one hand, he energizes his audience, providing them with a sense of belonging and shared ideology.
The rioters won't stop, they shouldn't stop, or we're not going to stop supporting them. And by the way, a lot of this said after the assassination attempt, 2 now against Donald Trump. But if the roles were reversed, Can you imagine the hysteria? State-run media mob would be on a whole new level. Keep in mind, the would-be assassin on Trump's golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida, mere 300 yards away from the former president, who was heading in his direction, hiding in an area never swept by the Secret Service, even though they knew about this Iranian threat, even though unauthorized paparazzi were known to post up there. Meanwhile, the shooter in Butler, PA, less than 150 yards away from the president on a rooftop in plain sight when he fired several rounds. And tonight, preliminary Senate report out on the assassination attempts in Butler, Pennsylvania. Startling failures of the Secret Service, the only drone visuals controlled by an agent who had just 1 hour of informal training on the device, had to call a toll-free number for technical help with the drone he's operating. More alarming, the lead Secret Service agent at the rally was aware of credible intelligence about a threat against Trump, but never passed it along to his fellow agents. Meanwhile, the on-site communications, a complete disaster. Secret Service agents observed local law enforcement running to the building, guns drawn, where the shooter was stationed, but didn't know what was happening.
On the other hand, his approach has drawn criticism for fostering division in an already polarized political environment. Detractors argue that his style encourages echo chambers, where opposing views are dismissed rather than debated.
The real insults come from Kamala herself, don't they? Because she insults our intelligence every time she sits down for even a friendly interview.
Laura Ingraham tackles the ultimate insult to the American people.
It could not have been a softer interview and presentation. The only missing line or missing question was, do you like long walks on the beach? She could reveal that as well. And as for the one-on-one with liberal billionaire Oprah Winfrey, if there was such a thing as a verbal foot rub, this would be it.
It seems to us that something happened to you the moment President Biden, stepped aside and withdrew his candidacy, that a veil or something dropped.
With Kamala Harris's failures on economic policies and border security becoming impossible to ignore.
Now, we have to remember, Harris has always benefited in her career from special treatment, including in this campaign. Now, she didn't have to go to win the Iowa caucuses or tramp through the snows of New Hampshire to convince voters there. And she doesn't have to do press conferences with hostile reporters, as Trump does. She hasn't had to explain her policy toward China or Russia. Her role is simply to repeat platitudes and memorize phrases.
We love our country. I love our country. I know we all do. That's why everybody's here right now. We love our country. We take pride in the privilege of being American.
Her press team has resorted to recycling tired, worn-out lines from 2016 and 2020.
I thought she said we were systemically racist. How do you take pride in that kind of country? And hope that the hundreds of millions of dollars that she's raised from millionaires and billionaires are going to be enough to drown out Trump's message of peace and prosperity. That's what they're hoping for. And if she wins, the establishment's going to make use of this template for all future campaigns, where the voters are kept in the dark, receive no assurances about anything, and they just simply dine out on celebrity endorsements and personality plays. This is a complete rejection of the democratic process from the phony defenders of democracy. And it's one big insult to all of us.
But as Laura points out, the real insults don't come from Donald Trump, whose jabs at political figures have become part of his brand, but from Kamala Harris herself.
But then came the surprise questions, and they were really kind of tough. Like, how are you going to reduce the high cost of living?
I'd love to know what your plan is to help lower the cost of living.
Yours is a story I hear around the country as I travel. And in terms of both rightly having the right to have aspirations and dreams and ambitions for your family and working hard and finding that the American dream is, for this generation and so many recently, far more elusive than it's been. And we need to deal with that. And there are a number of ways.
Laura highlights how Kamala's media presence often feels more like a shallow attempt at charm than an opportunity to provide substantive answers. She mocks Harris's interviews as overly simplistic and superficial, noting how these moments often come off as scripted performances rather than genuine conversations.
Far more elusive, the American, what? I love how she acts like some external force caused inflation, by the way, not her and Joe's idiotic spending bills. Now, that's insulting, and it's also arrogant to believe that Americans should vote for you even as you are unwilling or maybe unable to explain your policies.
According to Laura, Kamala's reluctance to directly answer questions on key topics like inflation and border security reflects a broader issue. Instead of offering clear solutions, Harris often leans on vague and recycled talking points. This, Ingram argues, shows either a lack of understanding or a refusal to engage with the reality of the country's problems.
Her answers kind of remind me of that college kid who, when called on by the professor, hasn't done the class reading, so he or she just merely restates the question posed, as Kamala did on the question of how she's going to fix the border.
Laura also points out the hypocrisy in Harris's public persona, calling out the inconsistency between her statements and the actual effects of her policies.
At this point, Oprah's got to be thinking to herself, man, I just should have run for president myself. It would have been easier than live coaching this woman. Now, every exchange was an easy Kamala layup. And by the end of the interminable 68 minutes, Oprah had allowed Harris to kind of rebrand herself from an anti-Second Amendment fanatic to a modern-day Annie Oakley.
Whether it's on issues like public safety or economic hardship, Ingraham accuses Harris of offering empty reassurances that fail to address the struggles Americans face every day. Laura Ingraham sees Harris's entire approach as a calculated effort to avoid accountability.
I'm sure they would have thought it was just perfect for Trump to laugh if he said someone would get shot if it came into his home. They would have, oh yeah, they would have said, oh, it's heartless, you have no compassion. What if you shoot the wrong person? This is just more insults to our intelligence. And of course, it was all calculated, but it was poorly carried out rebranding. Kamala's just like you. But then you think to yourself, I don't speak like the words of one of those lame motivational posters hanging in your company break room.
By relying on friendly interviews and scripted performances, Harris tries to rebrand herself without ever addressing the core issues that matter most to voters.
The freedom to just be. I love how Oprah goes, Note her use of the phrase, how we came into being there. And again, the freedom to be. Freedom to be, unless you're one of the infants in the womb who's aborted in Kamala's dreamland. And speaking of that, today she uttered more insulting drivel about abortion in Atlanta. Her language was crafted specifically to mislead the public.
To Laura, this strategy isn't just dishonest. It's insulting to the American people, who deserve real answers and leadership, not hollow platitudes and superficial campaigns.
Most vulnerable among us? How about those who can't yet speak for themselves? How condescending, though. Condescending to women, who, by the way, are poorer than they were 4 years ago, are less safe than they were on the streets 4 years ago, and less confident in the future than they were 4 years ago. But Kamala's crack group of high-paid pollsters and consultants believe that women's first, second, and third most important concerns are abortion, more abortion.
Laura Ingraham doesn't hold back as she continues to dissect what she sees as Kamala Harris's superficial strategy.
We already know about the elites here at home who are doing everything in their power to defeat Trump. There's billionaire Alex Soros, who met with Tim Walz yesterday. He appeared to be in his favorite genuflect position. Then there's billionaire Mark Cuban, who it seems is incapable of measured thought about Trump's enduring popularity.
She focuses on how Harris's avoidance of tough questions and reliance on rehearsed responses are meant to distract from the vice president's lack of real achievements. According to Laura, this method not only undermines the role of leadership, but also signals a clear disregard for the concerns of everyday Americans. Ingram criticizes Harris's preference for controlled environments, where she's only faced with easy, pre-approved questions
that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on anti-Trump ads and lawsuits. Huge donor money also flows to smear groups staffed by Never Trump hatchet men. But Trump doesn't just have to beat all of them and their money. He's also up against the global elites who love having a weak U.S. president in place who puts foreign interests before America's. That's why they love Biden.